Hey, fifth graders, very, very happy Tuesday to you. Happy last day of March. It is almost April. I hope you guys have some fun April Fool's things planned tomorrow for your family. Don't do anything that's not smart. Today we're going to continue reading 10 more pages of our book. As you may see, if you have the printed out packet, we're going to read every day and then just do questions on one of the days this week. If you feel like doing the questions as we go, you can do that as well. Another announcement is that if you're able to do the work on the Google Classroom, we do prefer that you do the work online instead of on the packets. So it's good if you have that packet picked up to use it as a reference. But if you could please do as much of the work online as possible, that will make it easier for me to keep up with you, to give you feedback, and to help you do some actual learning. Today we're going to read pages 127 to page 137 of As Brave as You. Here we go. This is when Genie realizes that he doesn't know how peas grow. He thinks that they grow just like the little circles themselves, and he's about to learn about pea pods. Is anybody else out there just thinking about Miss Brake nonstop as we read this because she does not like peas? I know. Now, if you snap it in half, you can see the peas in there. Grandma handed the pod to Ernie, who bent it until it broke open and showed Genie. Inside of the pod, these little things that looked like little green pills were hiding out. Genie couldn't believe it. Now, the way that you tell if the peas are ready is just by squeezing the pod before you pick it. If they feel empty, like you don't feel full peas in there, Grandma took the broken pod from Ernie and squeezed it, showing the boys that the peas were just the right size. Then they're not ready. Don't pick those. Put the good ones in the basket over there. We eaten all these peas? Ernie asked, slapping a mosquito on his neck. Genie wanted to say, I'm not eating no peas, but he already knew that Grandma wouldn't want to be hearing all that. No, child, I told you. Folks around here love 'em. I go to the market and I sell 'em. I'm going next week, and since y'all are here and you're so strong, I might need both of you to come with me. Oh, okay, Ernie replied, a sense of triumph in his voice. If you need anything else, just holler. I'm going to be over there dealing with the weeds. And y'all might as well get used to the flies and mosquitoes, because ain't nothing you can do to stop them suckers. Y'all must have sweet blood. Got that from me, Grandma said, wandering away, slapping her own arm. Has anybody ever heard before that they have sweet blood and that mosquitoes like to bite them? I've heard that a lot. Genie wondered why Grandma didn't just get one of those fly zappers like they had in Marlin's, as he and Ernie squeezed and snapped peas off of the vine, tossing them into the basket. They worked as fast as they could, yanking pods off, sometimes 2 at a time, because they didn't want to be out there all day. Not with the heat, nor with the wet soil, and definitely not with the mosquitoes. Every couple of minutes, they would hear gunshots. Crab. Genie flinched each time, but he couldn't stop thinking about how cool it would be to be out there shooting stuff. You think that man really eats squirrels? Ernie asked, pinching a pod and then leaving it hanging on a stalk. I don't know, Genie said, now giving in and falling down on his knees in the moist earth to get at the ripe pods growing down low. Some of them had grown so big that they had busted open. Grandma hadn't say what to do with those, so Genie figured he'd better leave them. Man, I don't think so, Ernie answered his own question. Don't nobody eat squirrels. That's just nasty. I think Grandma was just playing with us. Another shot rang out. Yeah, except Grandma don't really seem to like the way she plays too. Yeah, except Grandma don't really seem like she played too much, Genie replied. Notice how the way that the boys talk to each other in dialogue is different from how the book is written. The dialogue is written informally because it's the way that 2 teenage boys would talk, but we know that that wouldn't be proper grammar if we were writing an essay or something like that. When they finished picking all of the ripe peas, Ernie took the water hose, squirted their hands clean, and then sprayed the mist into the air. The water came sprinkling down on them like snow, making their skin tingle. It felt amazing. But before Jeannie could ask Ernie to do it again, Ernie dropped the hose and jogged over to the edge of the hill, craning his neck as if listening to something in the distance. I thought I heard something, he said when Jeannie caught up to him. I didn't, Jeannie said flatly. He knew what his brother was doing. He was doing what he always did whenever there were girls in any situation. Getting all crazy. Or, as Ma would say, he'd start smelling himself, which meant his nose was open, which meant girls. I think I did, Ernie said, geeking out. I'ma go check. Before Jeannie could even respond, Ernie started down the hill. He told Jeannie that he could come too, but the way he said it, like a no-look pass too fast to catch, was the same way that really meant, please don't come. So Jeannie went back over to the pea patch, grabbed the basket of winners that he and Ernie had picked, and headed back towards the house. He figured he could take his time to look for the piece of the wheel. It had to be somewhere in the living room, and if he found it, he could just glue it all back together. But Grandpop had different plans. Who's that coming inside, bringing all that outside with him? Pop was standing at the counter, using a spoon to smear peanut butter on the side of an apple. It's me, Jeannie. He left the peas on the porch, took his muddy Converses off at the front door, and left the bathroom door open as he washed the rest of the grit and soil sludge off of his fingers. Tell me, son, how does a small boy like you have a smell coming off him so big? Grandpop tugged the tip of his nose as Jeannie came back into the kitchen. Jeannie lifted his arms, sniffed. Didn't smell nothing. Grandpop was wearing a white V-neck t-shirt tucked into a pair of navy blue slacks. A black belt. No gun, Jeannie noticed immediately. He had a tiny piece of tissue stuck to his chin. Must have cut himself shaving, Jeannie thought. Dad did the same thing all the time. Jeannie sat at the table. Grandpop poured a glass of water. If you sitting out here, you'll be sitting alone, Grandpop said, getting the water in front of Jeannie. Setting the water in front of Jeannie. Where are you going? Jeannie asked. Grandpop poured himself a glass of not water from the bagged bottle that Crab had brought. He held the glass in one hand, but before picking up the peanut buttered apple, he set a smaller paper bag, one that wasn't covering a bottle, in front of Jeannie. Little Wood, the real question is, are you coming? Then he walked out of the kitchen. What did that mean? But Jeannie took a swig of his water, grabbed the bag, and followed. They didn't go far, maybe 8 or 9 steps into the living room before reaching the door. The Nunya Business door. Jeannie inspected the floor quickly, his eyes landing on every knot in the wood, thinking that it could be the other half of the wheel. Where could it have gone? Maybe it hit the floor and rolled into another crack, a crack in the living room floor, which would make Jeannie the unluckiest kid in the world, or at least in North Hill. Grandson, reach into my pocket and grab the keys in there, Grandpop said, interrupting Jeannie's frantic forage. Jeannie slipped his hand into Grandpa's pant pocket and pulled out a set of keys on a key ring. What in the world would Grandpop need so many keys for? It wasn't like he was going anywhere without Grandma. It's the square one. Jeannie pushed the key in, turned it, and then turned the knob. The door didn't budge. Gotta push it hard, son, Grandpop advised. So Jeannie pushed for all he was worth, and as the door flew open, he stumbled forward into... What the heck? Jeannie gawked, trying to look in every direction at once. He glanced back at the door. Where was he? Did Grandpop have some sort of weird portal in his house? Was North Hill some sort of country version of Narnia or something? Sure did seem that way. Behind him, he could still see part of the house he was used to. The peeling sea green walls, the linoleum floor of the kitchen, the television in the living room. It was all still there. So he was still there. But inside the room, the Nunya business room was weird. Weird. First of all, sunlight filled every cranny because the entire ceiling was glass, like a giant sunroof. Then there were plants everywhere. Everywhere. 6-foot-high trees growing out of pots, and 20 of them. Vines crawling along the walls, and plants with crazy colored leaves, some the size of paper plates. Then there was the floor. The floor was covered in thick, fake grass. Grass! Vibrant green. It was some kind of miniature golf course carpet or something. Once his eyes and his brain had finished adjusting, Genie realized it was also crazy noisy. Bird sounds in every which way. Tweets and chirps and loud singing all happening at once. What? Genie took one hesitant step forward, then another, until he saw, tucked between all of the foliage, 5 bird cages, all made of wood and wire, and set up like small castles. Some were entangled in plants, leaves growing between the skinny bars. Genie glanced warily at his father, then went from the cage to cage. Wow, just wow. He recognized the birds, one in each cage, and they were the same as the ones he had seen pecking around on the front porch, the one wearing the blue feathers like a cape and a mask. They flitted around, their wings flapping against the wiry walls, cheeping their blue heads off. There was one window facing the yard. It had a brown smear on it. Genie figured that was the window that he had hit with the poop. Oops. He was glad that Grandpop wasn't in there when that happened. It might have scared the old guy to death. In the middle of this indoor forest, smack in the center of it all, were 2 rocking chairs, and a small table between them with a small cassette player on it. Grandpop moved slowly through the foliage, not stopping until he bumped one of the chairs with his lap. He tapped the table lightly before setting his glass down. Then he went back out the way that he came, pausing to make a ch-ch-ch sound at one of the cages he passed, and closed the door. Then he was back, apple still in one hand, easing himself into one of the seats. Sit, he said, pushing the arm of the other chair so that it rocked lightly. What? Genie looked over. He had a feeling that the weird grass carpet, it was as soft as grass. What is this place? Grandpop took a huge bite of the apple, chewed, swallowed, and then said, This room here, this is my outside. Had it added onto the house right before my old blinkers went black. He bit down into the apple again, this time just to hold it in place so he could pick up the cassette player. He ran his fingers along the face of it, the knobs like eyes, the rows of buttons, play, stop, rewind, pause, fast forward, eject, like teeth. Grandpop could have asked Genie to do some of these things to help, but he wouldn't. He hit play. The music wasn't music. It was just sounds. Breeze blowing. Outside noise. Genie, still holding the paper bag, sat down uneasily in the other chair, trying not to freak out, especially since they were sitting in front of 5 bird cages, which, Genie realized, if you looked past the intertwining vines and leaves, were arranged in a semicircle. But we're still inside, Genie exclaimed, now starting to see all the things he knew Grandpop hadn't, like the fact that there was bird poop all over the place, and that some of the vines were so thick that they could be hiding pythons or boa constrictors or something. And some of the plants were dead, brown as dirt dead. Grandpop pulled the apple from his mouth, taking another juicy chunk of it, and pushed back in his chair. Then he let it rock forward like a little kid on a swing. Littlewood, my boy, you're way too young to not have an imagination, he said, between chewing. He stopped the chair suddenly and leaned towards Genie and sniffed. What? Nothing, Grandpa pulled back. It's just, you smell like your daddy and your uncle used to smell. Oh, hand me that bag. Jeannie gave Grandpop the bag and then took another whiff of his armpit. Still nothing. They picked peas too? That's where we're going to pause for today. Tomorrow we'll start on the top of page 137. You can go ahead right over now to your vocab video and watch that. You don't have to do the comprehensions for this questions for this chapter until after we finish the whole chapter. All right, I'll see you guys in a few seconds for your vocab assignment.